Very excited to have Semi Bird here. He is running for governor of Washington State, and he's a conservative. Does he have a fighting chance? I don't know. Let's watch your campaign video real fast so people can get an idea of the platform you're running on, Semi.
Hello, Washington. I'm Semi Bird, and I'm running for governor. I've spent most of my life in service to our nation as a United States Marine and Army Special Forces Green Beret. I now find myself on the front lines of some of the greatest challenges facing our state. As someone who began his life's journey in the inner city ghetto of East Oakland, California, born to a single mom with 7 children, pre-civil rights, I know firsthand that the American dream is available for everyone. Through hard work and prayer, not helplessness and despair. I continue to serve our children and families of our community as a school board director and legislative representative. I do so because I know our children are our future, and that families and parents are the most important stakeholders in their children's upbringing, and that includes their education. Here in Washington State, crime and inflation are at an all-time high, while educational outcomes are at an all-time low. And how is our current state leadership responding to these concerns? By using our state revenues to increase spending, all the while imposing more taxes on our families who are struggling to make ends meet. By bringing forth bad policies which hamstring our law enforcement professionals and exposes our communities to greater dangers and greater threats. By bringing forth racially divisive policies and isolating us from our children's education. Isn't it time to replace career politicians with career Americans? My fellow Washingtonians, it is time for visionary leadership. It is time for a new direction. Join me, Republicans, Democrats, Independents alike. Let's stand together and focus on what we can all agree upon: safe communities, quality in education, and economic opportunity for all. Together, we will bring unity, leadership, and solutions with action to Washington State. My name is Semi Bird, and I'm running for governor for all of Washington. Remember, united we stand, together we can. God bless.
Okay, you've got U-Haul here says never. He's never going to win in Washington State as a conservative. But Jeff says, Mr. Bird, I'd vote for you, but I moved to Montana. And you know what? We're moving to Florida, so... All right, let's talk about that real fast. Let's just get the elephant out of the room in this one, is that Washington State typically goes blue because of the Western Washington area, the Seattle area, which you said, you grew up in the Seattle area. Yep. So people think you're an Eastern Washington resident, because maybe people outside of Washington don't understand. It's very politically divided. The East Side almost wants to be its own state. I mean, they don't even almost want to. They've petitioned to do that. People have petitioned to do that, to just separate and not be part of the Seattle. But Seattle, it's almost a totally homogenous, politically blue side of the state, and that's the populated side of the state. So they typically elect a Democrat. What are your chances?
Great. I mean, I really wouldn't be doing this. Maybe we'll talk about my background, but I spent a lot of time in Special Forces intelligence. So we understand the operational environment, if you will. We do this in-depth analysis. So we know the culture, we know the people, we know the politics. And so what I would say directly and specifically, while we typically, or they typically, I'm going to say we because we're one state, as we typically vote for Democrats in this state, it's because of the choices that they feel that they have. They don't feel that they have a better choice. And if you look at the number of independents in Washington State, independents are the largest growing political group, nonstop. It's been like that for many years. It's because they don't feel comfortable as a Democrat voting strictly them or voting strictly Republican. And I actually understand that. So I think if you have a strategy, if you have a plan and you execute with precision, you can overcome the thought process, the mindset that a conservative can't win. That's simply not true. We can and we will. And I'll get more specific as you ask. But we are going after the voters that have been left behind and forgotten. We have never effectively engaged minority voters. We haven't engaged our veterans the way we should. We haven't engaged our young people the way we should. And so people are left to their own devices, going with what public sentiment is, going with what social media tells them. No, we're going to win because we have a strategy to win.
Okay. What do you think is the role of the media in the political landscape in Washington State, the political landscape that you and I were both just talking about?
Well, the role it should be is to be objective reporting and focusing on the news, not sensationalism, not catering to the establishment candidate, not catering to what the political aristocracy says is the right thing to focus on, but real news, real media, and equal representation for all candidates. That's what I believe they should do. But here's the reality: they don't. You know, we just recently had another Republican get into the race just a few days ago. I've been in the race for the last 4 or 5 months. We've been traveling the entire state, meeting with real people on the streets in communities in King County, all the way over to Stevens County and Pend Oreille, up and down. So, but what did the media do, right? We have raised more small dollar donations than any other Republican candidate combined. But the media says this new candidate, the first to announce in Washington State for the Republican Party, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like cricket for us. And that's okay. I mean, there's no jealousy. We're still going to run our campaign. We're still going to win. But to your point, yeah, it's clearly media biased. And I'm not against the media. They do what they do. But we're going to do what we're going to do. And we're going to stay true to our strategy, to our plan, and we're going to execute again with laser precision. And that's how we're going to win.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but are you running at third party?
No, I'm a Republican.
Oh, you're running as a Republican. Okay.
Yeah. And let me just be clear. I'm a Republican running as a Republican. Okay.
Okay. I see what you mean. Instead of what, a Democrat running as a Republican?
Well, you know.
Okay. So I'm curious. I don't who was the candidate that they said was the first instead of you?
Oh, Raul Garcia. He ran for governor in 2020. Okay. He came in fifth just after Tim Eyman with 5.4% and was primaried out. And so it was Lauren Culp and Jay Inslee.
Why do you think they said that you were they didn't say that you were the first and said he was the first to throw in his hat?
Well, again, I would say establishment, and so I'm not an establishment candidate, right? And so I'm the of the people, by the people, for the people candidate, for all the people candidate, and there's a difference. And so, if the media had fairly and objectively looked at the PDC, right, and they would have seen the Public Disclosure Committee, they would have seen we had raised we're at $64,000. It's not millions like the establishment is going to bring for this other candidate, or like they have brought for Bob Ferguson, which I think he transferred $0.3 million of that somehow. And that's, legal in Washington State. That's all good. Again, we're still going to win. But so they just bypassed the fact that we were number one. We have raised more small dollar donations than anyone. And Dr. Garcia, and I think he's a kind man, and I like him, and I will never disparage him. $0. But yet, he is the headlines throughout all of the media sources throughout the state, right? Throughout the state, east side, west side, and even stations that would consider themselves conservative. I saw one in Richland, Washington, my Tri-Cities where I'm from, KND News. I think it's a radio, and they never asked me. They never talked to me. They did when I was running for school board, but apparently there's a change of heart.
Okay, I want to ask a question. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. My old station, King 5, sort of when I was leaving, but then definitely after I was gone, has gone through, I think, a very targeted campaign to talk about race and to hire specifically based on what they would call, I think, diversity. But I question that because I don't think it's really a diversity spectrum of like thought and approach. It's really just the way people look, which to me seems more racist, actually, because it's like you look a certain way, so you must think a certain way. And they've had all these videos that have come out about like, I can't remember what it's called, like defining race or something like that. And the comments you could see, the comment section, they're not necessarily as popular, I think, as maybe, I don't know, maybe people in some areas like really like them, but I can tell people are kind of feel like the media in Seattle is sort of shoving this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff down their throats. And I wonder sometimes when like you have a Black conservative who doesn't fit what the media itself, whether they really maybe buy into it, they really think this is the way it is, right? I'm not trying to say they're necessarily just trying to sell something or get ratings, though that's part of it. I know that they're like, we got to hire for this. We got to hire for this. But you don't really fit in the category, because I would say they don't have a lot of Black reporters or anchors that would also fit as a conservative. And I think maybe in their minds, like, they don't have a place for you. Do you think that might be part of it, that there's something that the media doesn't know how to cover or doesn't like about a Black conservative, because for themselves, they already have these stereotypes of like how Black people think, how white people think, this is how all these people who look away think. That's just my guess.
I'm listening to you. I'm thinking amen and preach it, sister. And I can go on and on and on. That's exactly what it is. Right. So these words, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that was August 28th, 1963, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and that March for Washington, for jobs and for freedom. That's what that march was all about. And if you think about where we're at now in terms of racial discourse and this weaponization of race that we're seeing, you're speaking directly to it. And so I'm a Black conservative. Someone said the other day, a Black conservative, that's going to give the left an aneurysm. And I chuckled, but I completely understood what they were talking about. So if you want to talk about news, fair and objective news, well, consider this. I think we're the only, I shouldn't say I think, I'm trying to be humble, but I know we're the first Black gubernatorial candidate in the history of Washington State. You would think that would be newsworthy. If elected, we'll be the first elected Black Republican in the history of the United States of America. You would think that would be newsworthy. But because I do not fit that mold, because I have independent thought, because I refuse to reside on the progressive plantation, I have been deemed persona non grata. And that's what we're seeing in the media and in our institutions. You want to talk about systemic? Let's talk about that being systemic. So the prejudice has shifted from Martin Luther King Jr. to this modern day racial movement. And who is being subjugated now? So I think they were equal in their subjugation. And it's not just whether you're a Black conservative or a white conservative, it's any and all conservatives, because the media and the institutions are rallying to this woke agenda that all white people are racist. And a Black man who has an independent thought, and I include Black women who have an independent thought or their own ideas that differ from the progressive, which I call regressive left, again, we become isolated and our diversity doesn't matter. We are not included, and there is zero equity. So we want to talk about equal representation. Let's have this discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you answered that question, because I shake my head sometimes wondering, like, if I were still there and could have these conversations in the editorial board meetings, would they be receptive to it, or would I be in HR? Like, I honest to God, I don't know. Because I try to, considering, for a long time, I mean, really, I was very ignorant of a lot of this stuff too. Like I was an environmental reporter, so I wasn't covering like race necessarily, like some of my colleagues who are doing that as part of the race series. But, with the environment, which was my specialty, there were a lot of, I think, thick marketing schemes, whether it was the government or the nonprofits, that I didn't pick up on until very late in my career, and then really technically ended my career, because I started realizing that reality was far more complicated than these oversimplified, stereotyped pieces that were 90 seconds, and I only had 2 hours to research, and I was throwing on TV as if I was an authority. I just couldn't do that anymore, because now I could see that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I knew I was never going to get a chance to really explore these topics in the system that I was in. So that's what, eventually why I left. But I wonder if you had the opportunity, like, would they be receptive to it? I don't know. I don't know if it's willful ignorance or what, because you're totally right. When I was in the news business, the person like who didn't fit the mold that was the most interesting story to do. Like, that was what you came to work for. That was the day that you went home and you told whoever you lived with, your dog, in my case, because I was, single and unmarried for a long time. I tell my dog, this was a cool day. I got to interview somebody really interesting. not somebody that's just like everybody else. That's why you get into the news business, to talk to people who are interesting, who make you think. Maybe you disagree with them, but at least they're different. That's what news is. That's why it's called news, right? It's new. It's not just the same thing that everybody's talking about. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they've gone to like boring stuff, frankly, because like you're interesting. Like talking to somebody like you is interesting. You think that they would say this would be interesting to Washington. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I mean, the ESG stuff makes sense to me. That there's like some kind of money-making stock incentive or something like that, banking incentive to it. But the average reporter doesn't talk about that. I mean, maybe the corporation does, but the average reporter doesn't. So the only thing I have left is that the reporters either they buy into it or they're just scared. They're just scared to say otherwise. And that's why it is the way it is. I don't know.
Well,
anyway.
In terms of story, it makes you wonder why. Because I think my story is appropriate. I think my story is inspiring. I think my story could help others grow by learning from me. I'm the kid that was born in the ghetto in East Oakland, California, 1961. So essentially, I was born without civil rights, right? I was playing in the streets of the projects while Martin Luther King Jr. was marching in the streets so I could someday have civil rights. And so when you think about that, I would think that's an interesting story because I've achieved the American dream. Mom brought us to Seattle, Washington, where I was raised. We lived in poverty, but I had an amazing, strong woman as a mother who raised me to be resilient, to have self-esteem, to understand my self-worth, to have personal courage, and to stand up for what was right and what was wrong. That's why she raised me as what she would call a Christian gentleman. I'm a high school dropout finishing up his PhD. I have a bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, right? I dropped out of high school to join the Marine Corps, but I got my diploma. I got my bachelor's degree, summa cum laude. I went to graduate school, Villanova University, 3.74. I have a master's degree. I'm finishing my PhD in organizational psychology. I've been a federal director. I've been an acting chief of staff at the Hanford nuclear site, right? I served in special forces, became a Green Beret at age 43. I've got some stories if people want to hear them. But when it comes to the mainstream and establishment media, apparently my story is not interesting. And that's okay because I'm not a victim. I'm a warrior. And I'm a warrior for the people of Washington State, all of the people of Washington State. I've watched certain political groups make false promises to what they call marginalized groups for decades. Never did anything, but they stand up and they act like they care about people black and brown, and they do nothing about it. I'm the warrior for them. I'm the warrior for people, for that young white girl who was being told that she is somehow akin to slavery and racial suppression. I'm her advocate. I'm her warrior. So again, we have a story. It's all about if the media is going to cover it. But really, I want the people to know my story. And I want the people to make a decision. Will I be the candidate that they want to lead their state in 2024?
Well, you may say it's okay the media is that way, but I'm going to say it's not okay. Because I used to be in the business, and I really wish that it would go in an opposite direction. But that's okay. That's why here we are on the interwebs instead. Let's talk about this. Trans minors protected from parents under Washington law. What a headline. I covered this already, this particular case with Brandy Cruz, who you may know, she used to be at Fox in Seattle, and she also does the independent thing now like I do. She's been on a bunch of times, and we were talking about this. I saw her tweet this headline because she was like, OMG, this headline, the Associated Press just basically saying, thank God, the kids are now protected from their parents, where the state is doing it. I mean, what could go wrong? The state obviously has no problems. Parents have all the problems. The state is the all-knowing, better representation of God himself. I'm not really quite sure, but anyway, I just thought this was a really interesting headline. I'm curious what you think about this particular story and this bill itself.
Well, I'm going to first say, I hope Brandy Cruz, being independent, as you say, will also someday have me on her show.
I will tell her. I'll make sure
she's had my opponent on her show already with all the rest of the media we were just talking about. But to this article, to this headline, I find it interesting and also concerning because right now, Senate Bill 5599, that most people are not aware of, and more people should, because this is a bill where a child can run away from home, go into the arms of the state, and they have what they would call reproductive care, whether it's to have an abortion or to change their sex, to initiate that as young as 13, as I understand it. So we are literally, and by the way, the key and most disappointing point of this is that it's an option as to whether to notify the parents. So what you're seeing now, so this is a movement in which parents who have traditionally been held responsible and liable as the primary stakeholders in their children's upbringing, to now they are being demonized, right? Once again, persona non grata in the eyes of the state. So the state feels they have to isolate children and protect children from parents. And these are not cases where a child is running away from an abusive family, right? I would understand that if a child is being abused, we need to protect the children. But what I'm seeing right now, we are transitioning into a state where children are becoming wards of the state and parents are being marginalized and isolated. So I've been an advocate as a school board director for parents' rights, not only in their children's education, but in their children's upbringing. We need to get back to normal. We need to recognize that we have laws that hold parents accountable to raise their children properly and to take care of their children. And I believe at the core of my being that no one has a more unconditional positive regard for children than those children's parents, grandparents, and family. So this nonsense, this is concerning, and we need more citizens to stand up and say, no, we will not vilify parents. We will not isolate parents. We will partner with parents to do what is best for children. And people will see that people who are opposed of Senate Bill 5595 or somehow anti-LGBTQAI+, and that is not the case, and certainly not with me. That is not the case, right? We are talking about children, protecting children. I will also assert that even gays, right? Gays against groomers stood in opposition to this bill. So it's not an LGBTQAI+ discussion. It's a protection of children, and it is a validation and protection of parents' rights.
It's another subject that my old industry takes on really terribly when it comes to giving viewers an understanding of the diversity of thought among different kinds of people. Like we were just talking about race. They often tee it up as if, like, first off, that the alphabet that you just listed, like everybody's just all aligned, you know? If you, they all think the same way, that there isn't, like what you said, there aren't groups called Gays Against Groomer, or that there are gays who don't want to have anything to do with the trans movement. You know, I have a friend who moved to Florida because he loves DeSantis. And then I hear from people all the time who say, DeSantis is ruining Florida for gay people. I'm like, well, I have gay friends who moved to Florida for DeSantis. How do you make sense of that? The only reason that they think that is because they have never heard a gay person talk about conservatism or talk about these issues. And usually, you know, we used to do this, and when I was in the news business, like when it came to medical related stuff, we'd often, like, if there were dissenters about mandates, for instance, particular mandates, we would have like the parent or the, you know, Joe Citizen or whatever at the gas station representing like the freedom position. And then we would have the Department of Health doctor representing science. And we would never put a scientist against a scientist or a doctor against a doctor, you know, and give you an understanding that there is diversity of thought among doctors. There's diversity of thought amongst Black people. There's diversity of thought amongst gay people. They don't just all think the same way. That's so, to me, that is so racist. You know what I mean? Like that is the epitome of it. It's just saying, like, you're defined by your skin color, right?
Well,
but they don't see it that way.
They don't. It's discriminatory, right? And this concept of diversity and the value of diversity, you can look at the McKinley study, and I can cite Tufts University and all these other stories that validate the value of diversity. But what is being done is they are abusing the definition. And this whole independent thought, this goes back to Socrates and Plato, Socratic method of dialectic engagement, in which when you have differing professional opinions or differing opinions, that adds to the body of knowledge. And we learn from one another, even if we vehemently disagree. Going through that process of open and honest discussion, we are hearing and we are learning. We may leave not agreeing, but we leave better off just by listening than we would have if we only went with our own opinion and our own thought process. We used to be, we stood against this homogenistic thinking, this groupthink. But now we're saying independent thought is somehow wrong. If you're not with me, you're against me. Oh my goodness, no. And this is why this is not Democrat, independent, or Republican. This is human. This is common sense. We need to get back to common sense. We need to get back to human decency, and we need to start putting people above politics. And that's what we're bringing with Bird for Governor. That's what we're bringing. We're bringing common sense back so we can have open and honest discussion. I've sent an email to the president of the NAACP. Why? Because I wanted to hear from her. What is her and her staff and the organization working for on behalf of Black and brown people in King County or in Washington State? What do I need to know as the next governor of Washington State to ensure that I'm bringing value, that I'm lifting people up? What do I need to know? But I haven't received a response from that. So again, I'm unafraid to reach across to diverse groups, whether they'll support me or not support me. And I will be knocking on Democrat doors, independent doors, and Republican doors, because I'm representing all citizens of Washington State. I need to know from them what they need or expect from me as the next governor of Washington State. This is the difference between a candidate of the people or an establishment candidate. An establishment that thinks they can choose for us, that they know what we need. They know how to take care of us. That's the same thing with the Progressive Plantation. They treat Black and brown people like we're pets, like that we're less than others, that we need their protection, and we do not. We are just as capable as any other race on this planet. And so we need to get back to equality and common sense.
I am going to reach out to Brandy on your behalf.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Over at AllisonMorrow.locals.com, where you can become part of my editorial board, $5 a month, go one-on-one with the most censored people on the internet. Magpie 4360, parents are still liable for the medical bills. I think that's true with that bill. So your kid goes, they don't tell you where your kid is. I don't know what happens, like who then approves, like if there's some kind of treatment that happens, but then they just send you the medical bill, even though you don't even know where your kid is. That's so crazy.
Well, exactly. And taxpayer dollars are paying for this. So parents are liable. Taxpayers are paying for these services to change the sex of a child or to give a child an abortion. And I'm not taking a stance. If a person wants to change their gender, well, this is America. If a person, we have a law on abortion, right? 9.02.110 through 170. But again, taxpayers paying for this, parents being liable for this, and parents don't even know where their children are. That's the concern for me. Where are parents' rights? Who's advocating for those families?
All right. Well, speaking of families, Father's Day is coming up. If your dad likes wine, go get him some AllisonWinePromo.com and get Extremist Altitude wine. All right. These are wines that grow at higher altitudes than where I ski, much higher, as it turns out. In Washington, we ski pretty low, like 4,000 feet. But look at the one in the middle, 8,200 feet. You know that grape is working really hard for you. So go show up some love. Get some AllisonWinePromo.com, 50% off the wine, 50% off the shipping, and it's a great way to support my work. If you're already a wine drinker, you have no excuse. The Rogue Malbec on the left is my favorite of all time. Hand-harvested grape, family farm. The one in the middle, oldest vineyard in Argentina. The one on the right, named for the Cowboys. Doesn't get better than this. So go get some Allison Wine Promo. Support my sponsors. It's a great way to support my work. You can get TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison as well. These are USDA certified organic roasts, light roasts, medium roasts, dark roasts. I have the espresso in my mug right now with my raw milk latte, which I make every morning, though today I have to pack up my espresso maker because we're moving to Florida and I'm very sad about it. So I don't know what I'm going to drink. I guess I'm going to have to do instant coffee like my husband. And my husband is like the total opposite of me. So he like eats McDonald's. He probably wouldn't like me to tell everybody his business about that. But anyway, so yeah, like I spend, 15 minutes making my espresso in the morning, my latte, and he just like takes his Nescafe, he just like puts it in and adds water and stirs it around and whatever. Anyway, so yeah, if you're a tea drinker too, there's some Katura tea for you. It's the fruit that's around the coffee bean. It's very good. It tastes a lot like black tea. I cold brew mine. Love it. It's a low caffeine alternative, high antioxidants, and another great way to support my work. Companies that are all about free speech and stick with me through some interviews I'm not sure other advertisers would. Okay, so let's go over to, I want to go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com because we had some questions that people put in for you ahead of time. I know one in particular as it's loading was if you could just bullet point go through your top platform messages. And you already kind of have talked a lot about what you stand for. We watch your campaign video and everything. But if you were to say like my top 3 or my top 5 things I'm actually wanting to do, what would they be?
Absolutely. Number 1, homelessness. And I'm going to bullet point it just as you asked.
Yep.
Homelessness, lawlessness. So we're going to address the homeless situation, right? We're going to address the lawlessness that's happening. We need safe streets for people to live, for their children to play on, and back to homelessness. Compassion is not giving people needles and watching them die slowly on the streets. That's wrong. That's not compassion. That is inhumane. We're going to bring quality education to all of Washington State through school choice, valuing families, giving those impoverished families equal access to a quality education for their children, while not giving up on public education, especially as it applies to rural education. We are going to focus on energy. And when we talk about energy, we're talking about nuclear, hydroelectric. We're going to preserve our dams. Again, we can move further into our economic system. We are going to lift people up out of poverty. We are going to fix our broken welfare system, which literally subjugates people to a lifetime of poverty by giving them a handout every single month, and not a hand up. They pay people just enough money to stay poor. And this becomes generational. So we're going to reform our welfare system. We're going to start lifting people up out of poverty. And those are just a few. And so I'm looking forward to questions because I take on the difficult questions. The truth is the truth. We're bringing the truth, and we're going to educate our citizens across the state about what's happening in the legislation and how it affects them, like the Senate Bill 5599 that we were talking about, or taking away our Second Amendment rights.
All right. Magpie 4360. I am so glad you are interviewing him. Thank you. And I will share this out far and wide. I have heard him speak and met him briefly at an event locally. Ask him to go into a strategy for winning voters, especially young and minority in the cities. The only thing that didn't come up at the event I attended was abortion. So I am interested in him threading that topic. Personally, I am pro-life, but a pragmatic one. We will never do away with evil in this world. We can only limit it. I'm very pro-informed consent. Women considering abortion need to see what abortion looks like at every stage. It's not just tissue. Okay, so it seems like 2 questions. How are you going to strategy for winning voters, especially young and minority in the cities, and abortion?
I really appreciate this question, and I really appreciate this person who sent it forward, and I appreciate them attending my events. And again, we're all over the entire state. So the neat thing is this could have been in Stevens County or it could have been in King County. Let's talk about the first one. How are we going to win? What is the strategy? And the strategy is this, as they pointed out, we are engaging in the minority communities, not for any reason to, again, just to take advantage of their vote. But again, I will serve all Washingtonians. And so I need to go into those communities, which we are doing right now. I want to hear from them. I will listen to them as I have been. And I'm going to add this to my strategies with action. What do we need to do? That's why I reached out to the NAACP. And so we are engaging our minority voters. I am walking into those fields in Eastern and Central Washington and talking to those migrant workers because they have voice. They deserve to be heard. I serve them as well. And make no mistake about it, migrant workers are not all illegal immigrants. These are people who work here, live here, pay taxes here, and have children who go to school here. So we're going to engage and we're going to value all demographics. We're going into the churches. We want to inspire voters of all denominations, right? Christians, Catholics, same as Christians, going to those synagogues, going into those mosques. Again, we are representing all of the demographics of Washington State. And let's talk about abortion. This is something I've seen conservatives run from, and I will not. I value life from conception through life's journey and death. And I think everybody does. I even think people will say, well, I'm pro-choice. They value life. Let's stop demonizing them as well. And I'm for giving women more choice. Why? Because I have been raised to value women's rights. Here I am, raised by a single mom. I have my beautiful wife and 3 daughters. God said you will be surrounded by women your entire life, and I have been blessed by that determination. And so I stand strong for women's rights. But when we talk about abortion, we have a law, again, 9.02.110 in Washington state. And so as governor, I have no authority to take away people's rights. And so why even focused on that? And I know why people are, so that we can divide. You're pro-life or you're pro-choice, and you're evil and you're evil. And I'm saying, no, that decision has been made. That ship has been sailed. So what can I do as governor? Well, I'm going to give women more choices. I want to plus up healthcare for those women who are going to seek help, to have an understanding. What can I do? Will I be by myself? How can I afford to have a child? I'm afraid. They deserve love. They deserve compassion, and they deserve resources so that they can make better decisions. And I think this person who asked that question, to understand, can they hear that heartbeat, right? So that they understand the consequences, because I would never want a woman who makes a choice like this to later in life have hardship or emotional stress for the rest of their life because they made a decision that they regret later. Again, I'm not taking a stance. I guess I am taking a stance, right? I said it clearly. But what I'm saying is, let's bring resources. Let's go to those young people. Let's make sure young men understand that their responsibility, right? That they are accountable for their actions. Let's make sure young women understand how precious they are and understand their self-worth. So I want to do what I can actually do as governor, not discuss what I can't do. And what I can do is bring more resources to value women who find themselves in that situation and give them every choice that they need so that they can look to see, can I keep my child? Can I put it up for adoption? What can I do? I want to do what I can do in that. And I don't want to weaponize it because that's what's been happening. We're weaponizing the discussion, but I will not run away from the discussion. I will be truthful and where I stand.
I do think the topic of support, whatever that looks like for pregnant women, is an interesting one because first off, you said I don't want somebody to regret a decision they made later. I've never met a woman who has regretted having a child, not one single time, and especially in particularly hard circumstances. I've just never, and I've talked to a lot of people over my career, thousands of people. I've never met a single woman who said, yeah, man, it was rough, but I decided to choose having my baby. And I really wish I hadn't. I mean, I've never met a woman like that, but I have met a lot of women who regretted having an abortion. I have a friend years ago who had an abortion. And I remember asking her, why she chose to do that. And she said, well, I just felt like, my parents told me I shouldn't because, I'm young in my career. And, she ended up marrying her husband, who she got pregnant with, but they weren't married at the time. And I said, what if your parents had said the opposite, had said, we'll be there for you. We'll get through this. And, we'll go to the doctor's office, whatever. Like, we'll I said, what would you have chosen? And she goes, I would have had the baby. I mean, and so it gives me chills to think about because I think that's like almost all women. I mean, I just don't know. To me, this has become definitely a personal issue because I was a career woman for a long time. And, I'm talking to you. I don't know if it's hard for me to call this a career because I enjoy it so much. It's just like because I get to be a mom too. I pop on the internet, I talk to interesting people for an hour or so, and then I get to go back to being a mom. And I love being a mom. It has totally changed my life. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's like the total fulfillment of, it feels like, of like my existence, and it's hard to listen to. Like for me, I have to sit back and go, all right, detach your emotions from this and try to see what's going on here objectively, like you used to do as a journalist. When you hear like either it's your peers or, you hear the protests that are often like put on TV where these women are like, I want to go study abroad. I want to do, and I'm like, wow, how did getting to study abroad become like the same thing as having a baby? Like, how did that happen? Where was the messaging that came out that got us women thinking that's like the higher purpose is going to study abroad? Or, I mean, that's so, to me, that's just, it's tough. I look at those because I can see how women got brainwashed to believe that, but it is so evil. I just look at that as so evil to like get women to think that. And like I said, I think because we've been sold this idea that we're only going to succeed, or we're only going to be supported, or we're only going to be something, be a part of something if we follow this particular path, and we're alone or something if we go the other way, And so I do think, like, you're bringing up, what does that look like? How does a community come together to support women, in those situations, is a really important one. Because, like I said, I mean, the conversations I've had have been like, yeah, I would have chose differently. And that's tough, to look back on your life and say, I would have chosen to, who was that baby? I would have chosen to have that baby if I felt like I had support.
Well, and again, and as governor of Washington State, I'm not here to take away anybody's rights or infringe upon anybody's freedoms. I'm for smaller government. I'm from government staying out of people's businesses. But what we have to acknowledge is we have a law right now. And the law says the life of the mother or the viability of the fetus. That's 9.02.110, because I've read it and I know it. And so knowing that limits women's choices. And I'm simply saying, I want to give women more choices. So knowing what the law is, which says you can't unless, well, then let's give them the choices. And so I hope you can see it. I hope your listeners can see it, that we're literally valuing women's rights. We are protecting women's health. And we're saying, let's give them the choices in lieu of the law so that they understand they are not alone. And I will bring government resources to support those young women so that they don't feel alone. They don't feel distressed that they cannot afford, that they're going to be helpless and all alone. They will never be alone. They shouldn't be alone. And I will never demonize a woman who's making a decision like this or at a crossroads like this. I want to elevate them just like I want to elevate everyone. So I appreciate you saying what you're saying. I appreciate the question. And I implore everybody who's listening, come out of the trenches. Stop fighting, acknowledge that we have a law, know that you're going to have a governor that's not going to use government or weaponize government to take anybody's rights. Article 1, Section 1, it is my job to maintain and to protect the individual rights of our citizens. And so what I can do is support and bring more resources. Thank you for that question.
Okay. Michelle C 2021. I love Semi Bird and his message. Let's send the bird to Washington is his message, and I agree. That's funny.
I love it. We've been telling folks, and I say, I don't want this to sound tacky, but in 2024, we're going to give Olympia the bird, and it's going to be a beautiful thing, right?
Okay, Don's wife. I hope he is as good as he seems to be. How does he plan to effectively combat the dirty tactics of the leftists without getting dirty himself?
Yeah, that beautiful question. And I think, again, thank you for the comment and thank you for your kind words. Here's the thing. People are tired of the divisiveness. People are tired of the name calling and the cheap and the dirty. You know what? I'm too old for that, right? I'm a 60-year-old man. I've lived life. I'm here by the grace of God. I should have died in combat, and I'm here, right? Serving our people once again. What I say to you is this. We focus on the issues. We bring real solutions. We unite our state. We come together as a leader. Leaders do not sow the seeds of division. Leaders bring unity. Leaders form coalitions. Leaders look and seek to build consensus, because united we stand and together we can. And that's our campaign slogan, if you will. I'm going to bring leadership to Olympia for a change. Think about what you're voting for. Look for the resume. Don't look for what the establishment or the political aristocracy tells you. This is our guy. This is our girl, right? No. Think for yourself, but let's unite. So, no, I'm not going to get dirty. Issues, solutions, be respectful, demonstrate leadership, servant leadership. That is the style I'm bringing.
Okay. Stephen Crater, from my neighbors to the north, I hope so, because my question was, can a conservative win in Washington state? Ricka Height 1, it is unlikely the DNC will allow this to happen and will use any means necessary to prevent a Republican to win the governor's seat in any of the Marxist-controlled left Western states. I think that was more of a comment than a question, but if I could expand on that as a question. Mm-hmm. When it comes to what appears to, and I'm going to be gentle on this one because we are live on YouTube, and one thing they don't let you do is question elections. But it does seem like there's a system here that's not. I mean, you've already talked about the media, but it seems like there's a political system that does really work very hard to keep its own, like the people who get to the top have been allowed to be there. And if they don't want you there, they're not going to let you be there. How does somebody who who says that they're not part of the establishment get through in such a dense political environment?
Oh, I love it. And thank you for that. And again, I'm a deep thinker. I'm a strategic thinker. I'm an intelligence professional. So again, when we go into a country, we have this process called operational preparation of the environment. We know the cultural implications. We know the systems. We've studied the systems. We do a risk analysis and we mitigate those threats. So just be assured we are on it. We are mitigating those threats. Right now in Washington State, we have voters. We have 900,000 Christian voters that did not vote. I think we have like 30% of Republicans that did not vote, right? People are not getting engaged and they're not voting. If we rally the troops, if people actually, instead of giving up and saying they're going to steal the election and it'll never happen because they're all blue and the machine's going to work against you. You know what? I've been shot up, blown up. I am unafraid. Bring it, right? I am here for a reason. And the cause is righteous. And if the people of Washington State will unite with me together, they cannot. Again, my friends, think about this practically and pragmatically. The system or the establishment cannot defeat a unified people. They cannot. There is too many of us. We just have to come together, have hope, and vote. Plain and simple. But to get specific, I am meeting with every single county auditor across the state. I want to understand the ballot chain of custody, right? And so we're having great conversations. And because I'm not targeting them, I'm not accusing them, I'm not playing this next election denier or any of that other stuff. I'm not buying into those weaponization of labels or false narratives. I'm taking action and I'm bringing real solutions. And you know what else? Ballot harvesting is legal in Washington State. It has been legal. Why would we not have a ballot engagement initiative in which we are going into places of the public, senior living spaces, presenting ourselves, valuing their word and respecting them as citizens and letting them know what we stand for and asking for them to vote for us? It is legal to leave a ballot box. It is legal to engage with different communities. So again, we are bringing real solutions. We're not sitting back and saying, we're all going to die. Forget it. I quit. No. We are already, as you are a perfect example, we are hemorrhaging citizens from Washington State. They project next year it's going to be another 171,000. Well, again, I swore an oath, protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. I'm here. It's a call to duty. I'm going to stand to my post and protect our citizens of Washington State.
All right, here's a question from YouTube. From Chosen One. What is your stance on all the environmental regulations the previous governor put in place or is trying to?
Yeah, I'll be very clear in this. I preserve and protect the environment of Washington State. It's beautiful. This is Washington State. I served 24 years in the military. No matter where I went around the world, people say, hey, where are you from? And I would ask them where they're from. And I would say Washington State. And they're like, oh, I hear that's beautiful. I hear that's where all the trees are and the rivers. I'm like, yeah, it is gorgeous. And we had the Emerald City, right? Go downtown and look at it now. This is what your last administration brought to you. Look at your streets. Has anybody had a catalytic converter stolen? This is what your last administration brought to you. So when it comes to the environment, and we can talk about climate change and that woke agenda, or whatever you want to call it, we will separate that out and talk about preserving and protecting our environment. And by the way, our fishermen, they for generations have protected our waters. Our hunters, they for generations have protected those hunting grounds and reduced population of predators and ensured that we never ever abused our natural creatures. These individuals, these traditions will be protected under this administration. We will value our fishermen and our hunters. And so when we talk about climate change, when you look at the renewable energy, I'm all for always looking forward. But you know what? We have our dams. We have hydroelectricity. We get the majority, 65% or 68% of all of our electricity comes from hydroelectricity. That is carbon free. That's why we will protect our dams. And then nuclear. The Columbia Generating Station, where I currently live in Richland, Washington, that is carbon-free and producing all kinds of energy, and I support nuclear. We should invest more in nuclear. They're portable, they're safe, and they're carbon-free. So there is so much we can do without tarnishing our landscapes with these windmills that just to maintenance them, to change out the cabling, which costs more than it does to even erect them to begin with, We need to look at that. You want to talk about going electric by 2035? How many people in the inner city, how many people in the central district can afford a $65,000 car? You want to talk about advocating for marginalized groups. Well, perpetuating this narrative that will force them to spend that kind of money on an electric car that they cannot afford, nor do we have the infrastructure to support. Also, by the way, that cobalt is being mined with the slave labor of young people of color in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And oh, by the way, the Chinese Communist Party is the #1 producer of those batteries. Do you see what we're doing? So let's get real when we want to talk about the environment. We protect the environment, but we need to separate out the nonsense from the real. I will always protect our environment because that is what makes Washington beautiful. That is what makes Washington great. And once we clean up our streets and make them safe again, which we will, make no mistake about it, we will become the tourist capital this side of the Mississippi, not just the Pacific Northwest, this side of the Mississippi, because Washington is beautiful and we will keep it that way.
Okay. Has anyone been hostile to you on the campaign trail?
I want to say, again, they don't give you a Purple Heart for getting your feelings hurt. They don't give you a Bronze Star Valor from staying in the barracks and wishing you were, my point is, unless you put a snake in front of me, I should have said that because now, but I'm good. I'm good, right? And folks, I'm afraid of heights, but I competed internationally for parachutes for special operations, and so Joshua 1:9. I have no fear. I'm protected. I'm good, and I know I'm kind of dancing around and being funny about the question. And thank you for asking. That's compassion. There's always going to be people who will be nasty and will be mean. And that doesn't penetrate me. I dismiss it. But if you have an opinion and you disagree with me, I will listen. I will respect it and I will value it. So no, I don't pay attention to the nastiness, and I've seen it. It will happen. I had people say, how dare you cite Martin Luther King Jr.? Well, yeah, right. If I have one more white regressive try to tell me how to be black, I don't know how I'm gonna respond. So no, I don't play into the game. I don't weaponize labels. I don't give into that. I don't allow them to weaponize government either. So we got to stop the nonsense, get real, love one another. That's what I'm about.
Okay, I think there was one other question I wanted to throw your way before you go. Okay. Will you absolutely protect Christian family schooling and health morality? Let me translate that the way because I want to broaden that a little bit. I mean, you can answer that specifically, but I think broader terms is, what are your thoughts on protecting homeschooling, parents' choice, I guess, not just homeschooling, but parental choice for school? And then also, what was it? Health morality. Yeah. The mandates, like the Inslee mandates, vaccine mandates, whatever. Thoughts on executive orders over the last couple of years with COVID. Washington State had quite a few of them, though. I'll tell you what, out in Eastern Washington, you wouldn't know because people out here just don't follow the law, I guess, when it comes to Inslee. I saw more bumper stickers. You want to talk about giving the bird? Somebody made a lot of money with these bumper stickers where people are giving the bird to Inslee. There were a lot of those out here, but yeah, I mean, in Seattle, it's totally different. So yeah, let's talk choice for schools and homeschooling, because I have seen, I don't know if they were the bills that went through, but I have seen, it seems like inching towards the same idea that there have been statements by very famous schooling type people that are like, we have to be very careful with this movement towards homeschooling because we don't know, it's the one way that we at school know if a kid's getting abused. They come to school and they tell us they're being abused. So if we have all these parents homeschooling, then how are we going to know these kids? The same kind of fear tactics as like the trans bill stuff that we were talking about, that we, the state, have to make sure that we have eyes on the kid because what if something happened, so I've seen that. And I do wonder, as more and more people rip their kids out of school and start doing homeschooling, like when's the government going to step in and go, okay, too much there? And then, yeah, also the mandates. Those are my two final questions.
So in terms of homeschooling, number one, let's be very clear. Homeschooling produces the best academic outcomes for students than any form of education. It's been proven, it's scientific. We can move on from there. But I think what this person really wants to know, and the answer is, the Byrd administration will not put its government tentacles into homeschooling. Parents know what's right for their education. We have a process which parents declare. We will support and we will honor that. And so when we support the homeschooling agenda, that does not mean that you have government ties or tentacles telling you how to educate your child, because it's been proven to be successful. So as it stands and how it will be, no, I will not. And I support homeschooling all day, every day, twice on Sunday. Moving into the mandates, let me just be very clear. I stood against the mandates. I didn't think the mandate was legal. It wasn't a law. There was no RCW. I think it was a violation of Article 1, Section 1, because power, again, is inherent in the people, and government derives their just powers by the consent of the governed, and it is government's job to maintain and to protect those individual rights. And when you mandate a vaccine, you mandate a mask, and we saw what they did. They shut down our economy, and look what happened to our economy. Our economy is in the toilet. But what are they doing? No. They tax you more to make up for their mistakes, right? Income tax. It's against the Constitution, but yet they just called an excise tax, and the Inslee Superior Court appointees validated and said, well, the governor says it's an excise tax. Bob Ferguson says it is, so it must be. Apparently, they forgot what their oath was. So no, I'm against the mandates. I was against the mandates, and when we mandated vaccinations, and we lost how many law enforcement officers, how many people to work our ferry system. They will be rehired, and they will be compensated for lost wages under my administration. And we will never have that nonsense again. We will make sure we truly understand the science. As you said, let's have both the doctors there, right? And let's hear what we need to. And as a governor, I know better to do my due diligence. And I also know better this. When you're talking about the lives of citizens, you leave politics and special interest out of it. And everybody watching, everybody who's been around, we know how much politics and special interests played a role in these mandates and these unconstitutional executive authorities. And so, or executive powers. We're not going to do that. I will not do that. Again, I'm a candidate of the people, by the people, for the people. I'm old school. And when we talk about me being a Republican, just real quickly for people to understand, don't be afraid. Don't run away, right? I represent the party of abolition. I represent the party that ended slavery. I represent the party that advocated for women's rights. And I represent the party that advocated and supported Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement to give civil rights to all. I stand for civil rights. I stand for women's rights. I stand for human rights. And I stand for every single Washingtonian, regardless of race, color, creed, or religion. We will do the right thing. We will unify our state, and we will bring solutions with actions to create value and prosperity for a new Washington, a one Washington.
All right. 2 last comments. Well, one question. What is his favorite wine?
I got to say late harvest Riesling. I'm an old school redneck beer drinker. So I'm going to say, I had one favorite. I switched off of that recently. So Coors Light, but if I'm drinking wine, it's late harvest Riesling. I really like it. So thank you.
Okay. And Maria, good luck, Semi. He's afraid of heights and his last name is Bird. LOL.
I love it. That's it, right? We face our fears, we adapt, we overcome, we improvise, we move forward, and we persevere. This is what we're bringing hope back to Washington State. And folks, just remember this. They are trying to divide us for a reason, right? If we come together to save our state, again, all of us, forget the party, right? Just human decency, come together. We can save our state. We can make our Emerald City shine again. We can bring compassion to those homeless who have been forgotten, right? We can make our our streets safe for our children and make our school system accountable, and so that they can perform better. We will fully fund special education in Washington State. Finally, there's so much we can do, but we can only do it if we come together. birdforgovernor.com. Go to birdforgovernor.com. Please donate. I'm not getting that establishment money, so I need you. Support our campaign, birdforgovernor.com. And God bless you all. And thank you, Alice. Oh,
my pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time. You're my last Washington State interview. Sammy, this is it. Wrapping it up.
The microphone. We're making history all over the place.
Yep. The lights are coming down right after this interview. So thanks for wrapping up my time. I never even asked you. I feel like I should just ask you. I mean, do you want to say anything about the other candidates? You kind of have like the other candidates specifically. I know people are concerned about Ferguson. I was fired by Hillary friends. There's a whole gamut of them, but I don't know if you have any last closing thoughts on that, you know.
You know what, friends, again, if you have any questions about me, ask me, right? And people are putting all kinds of disparaging things. They've questioned my military service, and he's being recalled because I took a stand, right? An equitable stand to give mask choice, to value those parents and those students. We have the highest suicide rate, lost learning, mental health through the charts. And so people are going to say nasty things, but I will not be that person to say nasty things about others. But as I said from the very beginning, I am a Republican running as a Republican. That's something for you to consider. And when I say that, again, I told you, I'm an Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, a Republican, a women's rights, a civil rights Republican. I'm old school. But you know what? We need to put people over party. And I will always say that, because party does not determine what I do or how I govern. It's how I affiliate. That's me being truthful and honest. I believe in abolition. I believed in civil rights and women's rights and equal rights and human rights. I believe in that. So that's why my party. I don't believe in Jim Crow. I never believed in slavery. I didn't believe in the KKK. That's why I'm on this side of the aisle. History. So let's come together, people over politics, and just do your research. I mean, and ask me. I will tell you, I will bring solutions. I will not bring insults. I will bring solutions with actions to the issues that affect all Washington citizens. So God bless you guys, and thank you.
Okay. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you'll tune in next week. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing, but I will be on the road and it'll be fun. Seeing the country. Have a great weekend. See you next time.